All right. Welcome to the next 67 steps, and it's the last one, but we got a lot more, and this one specially recorded here in a room with, I think, 750 people. Everybody say hello. Can you not clap? She has a sign that said, "You should be here." Oh, that's good. All right, so there's a couple reasons. Some of you who got in the program early, I didn't have all the steps done. And one of the things, the reason I could have done it, it's not that hard for me to do this. I wanted to show people what the founder of LinkedIn said about business. He said, if you are not embarrassed of your first product, you waited too long to launch the business. Think about that. If you're not a little embarrassed, now you don't want to be extremely embarrassed. You don't have a 67 steps program and it has one step. People are going to get mad. But you know how many complaints I get about not having the 67 step done? Almost none. Why? Because people don't demand perfection from your business unless you're in the airline business. If you are in the airline business, they do demand it. Okay? They want to, although they just demand it from the engines. They definitely don't demand it from the stewards and the stewardesses. For each of you that's watching this, that's an entrepreneur, and if you're in the 67 steps, I hope now the next step for you is to progress into the other programs that we have, the advanced 67 steps, which are more about living out your destiny, business, how to make money, financial independence. So the last 67 steps is titled Annihilating the Amygdala and MPFC Mastery. Okay? Good dopamine word. Everybody here is like, oh, I never heard of that. Annihilating the amygdala. Now, I just said that I waited to launch this step to show everybody who isn't launching their business, isn't making momentum, or not going to the next level because they're afraid that customers will write in and complain. Here's a little benchmark I use. If about 5% of people don't complain and write you nasty comments, you're a nobody. Your business is a nobody. You want some hate. Now, hopefully it's ungrounded hate. You don't want legitimate complaints. But there's a lot of weird people out there. I knew, you would think if you start a nightclub, what's the number one thing guys want from a nightclub? Men in this room? Would you like to go to a nightclub that has attractive women or not? Okay. So I made a nightclub, got in that business, and we figured out a way, connections, promotions, get a lot of beautiful women to go. So you'd think you'll never get a complaint, right? One day, checking my email, I get a complaint. Tai, you built this business. I am very religious and conservative. Your clubs cause me to have a lot of lust. That's literally what it said. I do not appreciate what you're doing. Now, one of my thoughts was, why are you going to a nightclub if you're very conservative, right? But the point is, fear, if you're not careful, and amygdala is the part of the brain that's an emotional center, and it controls the fear that's in your brain. If you don't control it, here's what will happen to you. And there was a story written a long time ago, an Aesop's fable. And so a dad and a son were going to town with a donkey to sell their farm goods. And the son was riding the donkey, and the father was walking along, and some people walked by, and they said under their breath, but the dad and son heard it, what kind of a son disrespects his older dad and rides the donkey and doesn't let the dad ride the donkey? So the son, amygdala, is stirred up because social pressure triggers fear. Like if you're in 6th grade and all the kids laugh at you, it's because you hear the whispers of 10,000 generations from your great-great-grandparents saying, if you get ostracized, you might die. Because 50,000 years ago, if the tribe kicked you out, You were stuck out with the lions and tigers all on your own. So we've carried these fears in. So the son and dad, the son goes, ooh, I'm afraid. People are talking about me. So he gets off the donkey, puts the father up on the donkey. They go a little further. Two people walk by, under their breath, they gossip. Oh, what kind of a dad, you know. He's strong, he's in the prime of his life, doesn't let his son ride. The dad feels bad. Fear builds up about what other people say. He puts, the son gets up on the donkey. They're both riding the donkey. Two people walk by. They're from PETA. Have these people, did this son and dad ever heard about animal rights? You got a poor donkey carrying fat dad and son. Fear kicks in, father and son. The father and son go, we're going to listen to that fear. They get off the donkey. They're just walking. Two more people walk by. They say, look at these jokers. They got a donkey and nobody rides it. So now they've exhausted all options, you would think, but they end up going into the city carrying the donkey. And they're going across the bridge carrying the donkey, and it's a little heavy, and they trip and fall, and the donkey and the father and son fall off the bridge into the river and lose everything. And so the moral of the story is, you cannot please all the people all the time. And beyond that, and I'm not just talking about people, okay? Because people, everybody knows that. Who here has someone in their family very negative that tears you down? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand. Okay. So you have somebody very close to you. Now, who's thinking deeper? Who's thinking more scientifically? Who's being torn down by the whisper of somebody from 20,000 years ago? Everybody should raise their hand. For example, some of you in this room are going, Tai, if I quit my job, I'm not going to do that. My mom will say, what's wrong with me? You got a law degree. What if I am not successful? I'm broke. And you know what the whisper, the fear in the amygdala of your brain is saying? It's your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother from 50,000 years ago going, we have a steady supply of food. If we move from the Serengeti, the plains of Serengeti, and we migrate up to North Africa, we don't know anything. There's no GPS. There's no welfare system. There's no grocery stores. There's a good chance we will die. Now, you don't hear it at that whisper. You just get an urge, a feeling. And so you seize up and you go, I'm not going to do anything out of the box. Or as we said, Sam Walton said, swim upstream. I'm not going to swim upstream because people will say stuff. But the amygdala has gone haywire. It's gone haywire. Because guess what? Who here, if they quit their job, has even a 1% chance, if their new business fails, of starving to death in the United States or a Western world country? Nobody. It's impossible. Nobody starves to death realistically in the modern world. But your brain doesn't know that, because how quickly does your DNA change? Your brain is so close to your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, it's basically identical. So that means you must annihilate the amygdala, and they call this fear annihilation. And it's a real term. It's not pseudoscience. Science. This is something that they're using in the military, people who come back from a war zone and have post-traumatic syndrome. Now, who here feels that fear sometimes dominates their decisions? Be honest. Give you a practical example. Very common question. People go, Tai, should I go to your conference or this other one? Well, that's a fear-based question, because what you're saying is, I don't want to make a bad decision. So ask them, what are you afraid of, man? Are you afraid of spending a couple $100? Is that recoverable? Is there anybody in the history of the world that bought too many books and 20 years later is like, yeah, I'm here homeless. You're like, what happened? You're like, I had a choice between Tony Robbins and Tai Lopez. And I made the wrong choice. I went to see that dumb Tai Lopez guy. I blew $200. Life has been one nonstop downhill slide since then. It's never happened in history. But you know what people don't fear? They don't fear living a crappy life. They don't fear wasting multiple years of their life. I'm talking, how many years have you and I wasted? I guarantee you everything I'm doing now, I could have done at 10 years ago in my 20s. I could be exactly where I am now in my 30s in my 20s. No doubt. I have no delusion that says, well, you can only do this 15-year-old kid just sold his business for 10 million bucks. 15. Another 15-year-old kid has a $10 million a year toy company in California. Don't tell me I could have done that. They might be smart, but not that much smarter than me. Maybe they're double smart, so I can make a $5 million business when I'm 15 years old. Right? So seeing clearly is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Fearing the things you should fear. You better fear wasting years of your life. I'm telling you, it should haunt you. I'll tell you what shouldn't haunt you. What the person sitting next to you thinks about you, your clothes. Most people are obsessed with music. You know what you shouldn't know? You should not know who Kim Kardashian's married to. What's the point? People always are like, well, Tai, these conferences, this talk, is it a scam? Because that's amygdala, fear. People are very obsessed with not being scammed. And I'm like, okay, where's the protests outside of McDonald's right now? Where's 10,000 people not signing up? We know for a fact, every reputable scientist in the world would be like, if you eat at McDonald's, you're degrading your health. 100% of the time. I don't care what meal you eat, and not just McDonald's. I don't want to pick on them. Where's the protests? Where's the scam? Why is it important for your life to know anything about Kim Kardashian? Why do we even know her name? Really, nobody knows who Sam Walton is. Knowing Sam Walton could change your life. He's what Charlie Munger calls, you know, the eminent dead, meaning the honorable dead. Why doesn't everybody know? Who knows what month Sam Walton was born in? Aries. Like me, that's how I know. I cheated. But a lot of people celebrate. Look at Kim Kardashian's Instagram the day it's her birthday. The whole world celebrates. The ultimate scam is what you're not scared of right now. So all the fears you have about starting a business and it doesn't work out, that's the greatest fear that's the greatest thing that should ever happen to you. Because like Edison said, who died, almost the richest man in the world, every experiment I did that failed, I knew I was getting a little bit closer. So you should be like, I'm excited. The average person's got to fail on 2 businesses before their 3rd one wins. So everybody who's new, just go into it with that approach. First 2 ain't going to be that good. You know how you can write a book? You know how you can start writing? They call it the first one's for the trash. Go into it knowing your first copy is going to be crappy. So don't come to me with your $1 billion idea on the first one. What you should do is like, I'm going to come with one that's going to make me $50,000 a year, or $25,000, or $500 a month on the side while I keep my main job. You don't always have to quit your job. Amygdala is all backwards. Now, why I call it MPFC mastery, there's another part of your brain, MPFC, and I'm not a neuroscientist, Herman is, so I won't get too into the intricacies because I'm sure I'll say it wrong, but you can annihilate fears. The best way to annihilate fears, they actually call them, scientists call it fear annihilation, is called exposure therapy. So anybody know Far Side, the cartoon, the comic? They're like little cartoons. And they show this guy, it's just a 1 square. He's in an elevator being dropped from a crane. There's snakes in it with him. There's snakes, dogs or whatever. And they show the guy's face is like, ah! And it goes, Bob decided to simultaneously cure his fear of heights, falling, snakes, and dogs. He just locked himself in a thing. And here's what happens. The Amish train horses this way. So if you're Amish, you don't have a car. Most Amish, real Amish. and you have a buggy and you have a horse pulling you, but you go out on the main roads where there's big trucks and cars going by. The most dangerous thing, okay, is they call it shy. If a horse goes shy, that means an 18-wheeler is coming this way or coming alongside you. The horse hears the loud noise and gets scared and tries to go to the side and pulls you into oncoming traffic. It's a good way to die, get pulled in front of an 18-wheeler, okay? So here's what they do. Every horse on the planet naturally inherits a fear of very, 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 very loud noises. Because 50,000 years ago, the great-great-grandparents of the horse, if you were on the, I think horses come from the Middle East, North Africa, Mediterranean. There, if you heard a loud kaboom, kaboom, boom, it was probably a predator coming after you or a lightning storm, and you better get out of there. So the fear that's in a horse's brain, built in the amygdala of the horse, worked 10,000 years ago. But now, that horse, that same fear will drive the horse to its own death. It will make it hear a loud noise on the road and jump in front of an 18-wheeler. And that's what you and I are like. We've inherited all these fears that in the modern world make us jump in front of tractor trailers, where if we just stay steady, we'd be fine. So here's what the Amish do. Now the Amish stop school in in 8th grade. They don't go past it. So they're not book smart, but they're a heck of a lot smarter than the education system we grew up in, and they have a lot of common sense. So somebody figured out if you take a young horse and 2 hours a day, you take it out in the pasture right next to a big freeway where lots of 18-wheelers come. And you take a rope that's very strong, you tie it around its neck, and you tie the horse to a post that it can't get away from. And let 18-wheelers go by for 2 hours. And you do it for 1 month straight. You know what happens to that horse? It never even hears loud noises again. It's not death. It just learns loud 18-wheeler going by means nothing. It's exposure therapy. And if you could put that horse's brain under a scanner, it's actually rewired its own brain. And everybody, we got a lot of people here into fitness. Everybody's like, six-pack, I want a six-pack. Women want to look younger. Guys want to look stronger. I'm like, but if I could take people's brains and project them onto a hologram, you know what people would look like? 500-pound, obese, just horrible. You got to get your brain in shape. And the simplest way with this MPFC, this other part of the brain, and what happens is, here's an interesting thing scientifically. You cannot get rid of your fears completely. So if you were ever bit by a dog at 5 years old, you will probably have a little more cortisol released when you see a Rottweiler ambling towards you. But we do, and our brains have equipped us with the ability to annihilate those fears. So the way it works, they say, is first your brain will go to the amygdala. Look for the fear memory. Oh, I started a business with a business partner, and then it didn't work out, so I'm never having a business partner again. That's what most people do. What you can do with exposure therapy will happen, your brain will go to the amygdala, then it will shoot to this MPFC, which stands for median prefrontal cortex. It'll look if there's a newer memory there of something better happening. If it finds a memory there of a business partnership working out, it will literally shoot back, and this is obviously oversimplifying, and annihilate the fear. So the only way each of us in this room can overcome a crippling thing is to face your fears. Chain yourself to a post that has your biggest fear. There is no other way that we really know to override fears. So let me give you some practical ways that you can do that. Number one, make sure, and I talk about this if some of you are in my more advanced programs business, you got to have time where you sit back. I call it, everyone talks about meditation where you clear your mind. I'm like, wait a second. I don't know if that's what the world needs. I feel like the world's mind's already cleared. It's already blank. Kim Kardashian, Louis Vuitton. It's already pretty clear. What I want the world to do, and what you can try, and I experiment, is a thinking session. Think through some of your fears. So for example, let's say you're like, I I don't know if I want to, which book should I buy? I'm afraid of buying the wrong one. Do the math. Your life, buy both. And then contemplate, what's the thing you should be afraid of most? For those of you in business, not having enough cash in the bank account. Most businesses fail not because they don't have a good idea, they run out of cash flow. Most businesses fail to cash flow. So you should freak the heck out. Who here, the classic textbook, I became a CFP years ago, certified financial planner. Who here has 6 times their monthly expenses in cash in a checking account? Or who here doesn't? You should be afraid of that thing. So next time you have a choice of buying, I bought some new shoes for this. You got a choice of buying these new shoes and stocking up on the checking account, savings account, go, I can either look like a nerd and have some old shoes and survive and thrive, because you can your business can go to crap and it'll take you a long time to recover. Be afraid of that. Be petrified of that. Don't be petrified of the things the world's petrified of. So the simplest way is you need a margin of safety. I'm going to talk about this next time. Benjamin Graham's, you could sum up the greatest investment advice. You better have a margin of safety in your life. That can be cash. That can be expertise. It better be brain power. Okay? Number 2, be afraid of aging. And I don't mean how most people are afraid of aging. Most people are afraid of aging. I'm gonna actually stand up and walk a little bit here. This 67 step will be a little different. Most people are afraid of aging because they think they won't look as good. As I said earlier, you should be afraid of losing you'll lose your drive as you get older, period. My grandma's 97. She's like, Tai, I don't feel like I did. My grandma's pretty young. She does Zumba at 97. It's funny. I'm like, how does my grandma come out? She's now shrunk. Like, grandmas shrink until I'm like, I'm not sure if she's going to keep shrinking. She'll disappear. But she has her headband on. She has a headband, and she does, you know what Zumba is? It's like the Latin dance. And I'm like, Grandma, is there anyone near your age? She's like, they're all young. And I thought she was in a class with like 20-year-olds. She was talking about 60-year-olds. My grandma, everyone, if you ain't in your 90s, you're a whippersnapper. So you should fear aging not for what everyone else is afraid of. Swim upstream, like Sam Walton said. Fear losing the hormones that will drive you. Most men, women are a little bit different, but most men are most creative up to a certain point, and there's a definite drop-off. Most people have had their billion-dollar idea by 45. There are people, if you're over 45, but if you are under 45, okay, you better kick it in gear real fast. What else? Let's see, anybody else have a fear that most people aren't thinking about that you should have? This one's tricky. Non-urgency? Not being urgent. That's related to time, so time, yes.
Not giving back to society.
Okay, not giving back to society. Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. Even if you're the most selfish person on the planet, you must have a level of altruism to your life, or generally the world will fight back and take from you. People who give, actually, okay, charity. Let's talk about charity for 1 second. Try this experiment. And this is, I'm glad you brought it up because I blanked on this. One of the best ways financially you can overcome fear is give a weird amount of money out of your bank account into charity. Now, I know it sounds opposite of what I said about savings, but I was talking about savings instead of consumer goods. The second you give, let's say you have $1,000 in your bank account. Or let's say you have $10,000 in your bank account. If you give $9,000 of it away today, we're going to have a charity you can give to, Heifer Project's one of the biggest charities in the world. If you gave $9,000 out of $10,000, here's the upside of it. You would be creating fear annihilation memories because nobody goes broke from giving to charity. I don't know if it's spiritual. How many people in this room are spiritual? Okay, so all of you can attribute it to pure spiritual things. You can say it's correlated, not causative, if you're like a super scientist. I get those people going, well, it's correlation, not causation, as if I've never heard of that. Oh, really? I never thought of that. I know that. I always think it's ironic. Guess who gives the most money away from all the billionaires? Bill Gates. Remember, he not only started giving away half of his money, but he started roping in. Warren Buffett didn't give that. It wasn't a real big giver, and he got him to give. And I remember when Bill Gates was sliding down the Forbes list, he was like, not the richest, not the richest. Then he started that thing. Magically, I don't know, he's the richest man back on, beat Carlos Slim again. And he gave away all his money, and it magically comes. The reason, even if you're not religious, I think, is it gets you out of scarcity mode, and it forces you to make money. Because one thing, some of you, when you start making money, I've had this urgency. I mean, I've had this issue. When you start making money, they say there's 2 economic responses that people have to making. Who here has ever made $1 million in one day? Raise your hand. Okay, 100,000 in one day, wired into your bank account. Okay, a few people. Okay, this is what scientists say. It's very interesting. If you started making $1 million a day, what would you do? Let me just take 1 or 2 voluntary responses. What would you do if you started making $1 million a day? How would, not what would you buy? Would you keep working? Would you work less? Would you work more? You're making $1 million an hour, let's say. You'd travel. Okay, so you maybe work a little bit less and do some travel. What would you do?
I would help more people become entrepreneurs.
Would you keep working as much, or would you work a little less and do some other stuff to
I
turn?
would keep working more on helping people become entrepreneurs.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I'd pay off my parents'
Become an investor. You'd what?
I'd pay off my parents' mortgage.
Pay off. Okay. Pay off parents' mortgage. So here's a cool thing. This is an interesting thing. Half of the world will say $1 million an hour. I will work for 1 week, save up 50 to 100 million bucks, and just retire. That's all the non-materialistic personality types. And it's probably genetic. The other people in this room, you know what, and this is a danger, you'll go, all right, I'm going to go to the movies with my friend. Now I've got plenty of money in the bank account, so you go to the movies. While you're sitting in the movies, you're going, this ticket costs $8, and the opportunity cost of not being working, this movie cost me $2 million. You'll start thinking, and if you were like me, unfortunately, I got stuck in seeing Paul Blart Mall Cop a few days ago. You not only lost the $2 million plus the ticket, but you kind of lose your sanity and your faith in humanity that they could make such a horrible movie. So about half the world will build up fear that they got to keep working all the time because they're making money. That's why people always ask, Tai, why do you think these billionaires keep working? I'm like, because they think that way. They're like, I can't stop now. Both of those reactions, I think, are fear-based. They're rooted in our primal evolutionary ancestry. So when you give to charity, you kind of rewire your brain a little bit. And I'm telling you, each person here, if you give, you know, there was a guy here at the last one, he's not here, and he's from the UK, my last conference, and he gave, and this guy's they're wealthy, 10 million plus or something. And he's like, I gave a crazy amount of money. And he's like, the next month, I made double back. Like some weird thing came in. So one of the ways you can annihilate fear around money is give some away to a good cause, really. And you don't have to brag about it. You don't have to say how much you give. In fact, I think it kind of jinxes it if you say that too much, right? Don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing kind of thing. All right, what else could you do to annihilate, to do the opposite, to swim upstream from everybody's fear? I'll tell you a simple one. Who's introverted here? I had an introvert friend. We were at Barnes & Noble, petrified of like calling attention to themselves. And I just started yelling in Barnes & Noble. And I was like, watch this. Hey, everybody. La, 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 la. And this is how the world is now. Everybody was just texting. One guy out of 50 people turned around and was like, haha, that was funny. He thought it was funny. It was a Jewish guy. He had a thing, he's like, haha. But he wasn't laughing at me. I think he was smart. He's a Jewish guy. He knew what I was doing. He's like, oh, you're teaching that girl to not be introverted. I think So I think that those of you introverted, you got to do some annihilation stuff like that, exposure therapy. My stepdad told me one great piece of advice, because when I was young, he's a really big guy. He's 6'8", power lifter, and he can sing and play the harmonica. So I'm 16 years old. We go into the grocery store. What's the most traumatic thing that can happen to you at 16 with your stepdad? Yeah, he's big. It's like LeBron James singing, right? So he just pulls out the harmonica and is like singing, and all of the store literally turns around. And I was like, don't do that, you're drawing attention. He goes, you know what, Tai? Soon, you're going to be older, and you're going to realize nobody cares about you. And you're going to wish everybody was paying attention to what you're doing. Some women, when they're young, they're like, I hate it. All these guys are looking at me and texting me and following up. I wish I just have alone time. I'm like, no. When you're 80, there's no guys going to be banging down your door anymore. So don't fear it. Don't fear the stuff. Fear real fears. What's another real fear? Going broke should not be a real fear in the modern world.
Not achieving what you really want.
There you go. Never. 88% of the world, if you take the world on average, people spend 88% of their life doing what they don't like to do. Number one tragedy in the world. If you fix that one statistic, creativity, people say California's going to run out of water. No, it's not. You really think that? What reservoir of water is relatively close to this hotel? What could you do with the ocean that you wouldn't run out of water? You could desalinate it. If everybody in this room was operating where 12% of their life they didn't like and 88% of your life, scientists call this flow. There's a famous book called Flow by Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. And he says, flow is when time stops and you're doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. It's the time of optimal creativity. Somebody in this room could figure out a way to desalinate with very little energy used and solve this whole problem. The best thing the government could do is start doing $10 million rewards for everybody, and anybody can enter. You solve this problem, $10 million. Dude, there'd be little 12-year-old kids sitting in their room, mad scientists blowing stuff up, and I'd be like, I want the 10 million bucks. And if I was the government, I'm like, you can have it. You won. The problem is you and I aren't creative enough. You'll never run out of money. You will run out of creativity if you're not careful. If you rewire the brain, you'll be good. Do not fear. Running out of money should be the least fear. But running out of time is a legit fear. Time is the only thing you can't get back. Same with energy. I mean, that's a law of physics. Time is Stephen Hawking said, he had a wager with another scientist. He said, I thought we'd be able to reverse time at one point in history. In the future, he said, the universe is expanding. He thought when the universe began to contract, that time would reverse. Benjamin Button. You'd be 70, then 60, you'd get younger. And he said, I made a mistake. As far as we know, the arrows of time move forward. Thermodynamically, that's one measure. Psychologically, in how you perceive time, right? And I forget the other one right now, but I talked about it in another one. Cosmologically. Those are the three, thank you, the way the universe is moving. So that's an ultimate fear. Money can be recovered. Donald Trump was $9.2 billion in debt in the 80s because he said, I started going to lots of fashion shows around the world, and he goes, and I wasn't chasing the fashion. He was going for supermodels. And he said, you want to be poor quick? Do that. And he recovered. And he was $1 billion personally guaranteed. And here's just, Donald Trump gets a lot of flack, and I don't know the man, so I can't say positive or negative, but I can say this. When I lived in South Beach, Miami, I was with my lawyer, and he was like, Tai, I said, how's business? He goes, a little problem. Got clients not paying the bills, my legal bill. I'm like, well, why don't you go collect? He's like, they're dead. They committed suicide. I said, what happened? He said, well, they bought all this real estate. If you remember back in South Beach, 2005, 6, it was overbuilt. They built for like 50,000 units, and there was only like 10,000 moving in. So if you do simple math, which people forget to do, the simple fundamentals, 10,000 people moving in, 50,000 places is going to drive, supply and demand's out of whack. Somebody's going to go broke. And these guys, I said, how much was their debt? He said, 500,000, 1 million, people committing suicide. Donald Trump is not like that. He mastered his amygdala. He went 9.1 billion in debt. Can you imagine that number? He said, I walked by a homeless man and realized that man was $9 billion richer than me. And I'm the Donald, right? So he just mastered his fear using logic. He said, what got me to this place? Reverse. And sure enough, he's now richer than he was before. Mastery of fear. And everybody wants the good life, but not everybody's as tough as Donald Trump. You must be tough. In the Hexaco test you guys will do, and I hope each of you do this, even at lunch, you know, you can network a little. One of those big 5 tests, one of the things is called emotional stability. Means recoverability. Some of you have high levels of neurosis. That means you go away from baseline. See, Donald Trump, here's baseline. I'm rich. I lose $9.1 billion. Most people at 500 grand to $1 million, they're jumping off windowsills. Right? They're not as emotionally stable. And by the way, very interesting study. For men, all the men in this room, if you want status in life, because a lot of guys want status, one of the most correlated things, and this is only for men, interestingly enough, men who are stable, tough. Toughness has been loved. So if you're a dude and you want to have more social status, be tough. Lose $1 million and be like, nah, I'll be good. Man, when you tell that story on stage, people are like, that's a badass. No, really. That's just, what story do you want to be told? Do you want to be Paris Hilton, who inherited her money? Does anybody admire her here in this room? Is everybody like, what a trooper? Would you trade with her to be, you know, despised, no impact, positive impact? I mean, I'm over-picking on her. You want to be the Kardashians? Or do you want to be somebody? I always say this way. If you were going to invest in somebody in this room, who would you invest in? Let's say you couldn't invest in yourself. Trick question. And I'm gonna flip it around. No, you couldn't invest in me either. I'm off the table. Think of it this way. You're in World War I, okay? World War I, each of you. You're in a trench, the trench of life. You're trying to survive, thrive. You got to juggle health, wealth, love, happiness. The world's throwing everything at you. It's throwing traffic, bosses that you don't like. It's throwing junk food at you. It's throwing the stress of relationships. So you're in that and you're fighting. And you got a guy with you, or a woman with you, who's your trench mate. And it's time to rotate out. The next person comes jogging in. And it's just like, you shake their hand. It's just soft hands. And they're just timid, and they get in there, and they're holding the gun backwards like this. The butt is that way. You're like, no, flip it around. Like, I never did this. I haven't. My dad was rich, and my mom was rich, and everything's kind of come to me in life, and everything great. Would you want that person next to you? Or would you want trotting along some dude, and he pops in there, and he's like, and you look at his face, and it's scars. He's got a few gunshot wounds in here that he's survived. And he's like, you ready? So all you got to do is be that guy. Really. And so the problem with Get Rich Quick scheme, if you came here for easy answers, you wouldn't want somebody who's had it too easy to be in the trench with you. Therefore, the golden rule says you shouldn't aspire to be the weak-willed, non-tribulation, non-trial person. You should be the tough person. Now, you shouldn't waste 20 years doing it to get there. So some of our fears are like, I don't want any scars. But that's illogical. You want to have the story of how you quit your job. And we're so weak-willed in the world, it's insanity. The government now will prop you up in almost every country, no matter what you do. You have the dumbest. America has bankruptcy laws. You're fine. It's bankruptcy. You can't get a credit card for a few years, but who cares? You're better off for those 7 years. You can't. There's nothing to fear, but we are all afraid of ghosts, man. Just whoa, whoa. And Tai, I don't understand why I'm not living the life I want. And the cool thing is, happiness doesn't come from what you think. There's this philosopher that has this thing called the hedonic machine. If each person right now had a choice, I snap my fingers, you would experience an orgasm 24/7, 365 days of your life. Who would want that? This is the big myth about do what makes you happy. I'm going to debunk that myth right now. You know what makes you happy? Contrast. That means necessarily. There's a great book, by the way, I'll recommend. It's called The Upside of Your Dark Side. It's like you definitely want to be depressed sometimes. All this stuff, putting people on medication to eradicate all depression, they're just eradicating delusion-breaking depression. Most people that are depressed are rightfully so. They ain't going anywhere. Your brain's pretty good, or your genes wouldn't have made it this far. You are the descendants of tough survivors, and that's what you should want to be. And the beauty is, there's never been a time where you actually get rewarded for that like now. Because back in my grandma's day, everybody was a survivor. My grandma came to America, and she got into a college at Bryn Mawr, and she said, I'd never seen people eat 2 eggs for breakfast. And my grandma was 22. And she's like, no, I never seen that before. And she said, then those people would have 2 or 3 eggs and only eat 1 and put it down. My grandma was not weak-willed. My grandma met Adolf Hitler at 19 years old. She lived in Berlin, Germany. Her friend was in the Nazi youth and said, you got to go meet this great speaker. My grandma walked into the room. She said, Tai, I immediately knew that guy was crazy. I said, how did you know? She's like, he was spitting everywhere. He was like, blah, blah. You ever seen Hitler just blah, 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 spitting? No. So my grandma said, right then, I decided I was going to leave Germany. And I said, was that tough? And she said, my grandma's very stoic. She will never compliment herself or build herself up, but she came to the United States on a boat, on a premonition that because Hitler promised he had a non-aggression pact. He wasn't going to go to war. My grandma said, I did not believe that guy. She got on a boat. She left her family. She didn't see them again for 5 to 10 years. There was basically no phone, no email, no texting, no planes that she could get on. And she landed in America, Ellis Island, knew nobody. That's the greatest generation. All of us are the worst generation, honestly. The kids of the baby boomers are worse than, the kids of the baby boomers like to be like, this Generation X is bad. I'm like, no, you guys are as retarded as everybody because you lived through the 1960s free love. You guys thought you just do whatever and everything would be great. That generation is the last great generation. But people in this room, doesn't matter what generation you're born in, you can become the greatest generation, and it's only by toughing it up. Man, if everybody was like my grandma, you think we'd be in all the trouble we're in healthcare? You think my grandma uses a lot of healthcare? She still eats like she's in the 1930 depression. I'm like, do you want another egg? She's like, I don't know. There's not a lot of eggs in there. I'm like, Grandma, it's Trader Joe's. You got Trader Joe's. They got lots of eggs. I don't know. But she has that mindset, and that's the mindset you must have. And everything else that you'll ever hear about business is you being a sucker. Really, them turning you into a sucker. Every 4-hour-week idea, now, not to pick on that one, but that one's very popular. You think that makes sense? You think you can work 4 hours a week and get what you want out of life? Well, just think about this. What would you do with the rest of your life? You want to have a good 4 hours, and then what do you want to do with the rest? We don't need that. We don't need more people spending all day, and you will not be happy. The human machine, the brain, only is happy building. That's why little kids at the youngest age will build. You put Legos down, kids will start building Legos. You put dolls in houses, people will start playing house. Your happiness comes from accomplishment. Now, people say you shouldn't tie your happiness to accomplishment. BS. If that's what Buddha said, which I don't think, I call BS. The biggest MRI machines will tear down that mentality at every moment. That is not true. What you should want is flow. And I hope everybody here, even more than financial independence, gets into flow. Because there's some people here that should start the next charity and take no money for themselves and live, as an example to the world of no money. I did that when I lived with the Amish. I wanted to see what it was like. The interesting thing, I was never been happier than I was there. But the Amish also have financial independence. They live very well on $30,000 a year. They spend $3,000 a year, make 30. They save 27. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. So, in closing, for this 67 step, and for everybody here, what we're going to talk about after lunch is some practical steps. This is the philosophy. If you don't buy into this, then you might as well not come back from lunch. If you're here for the easiest thing. My favorite movie scene is where Tom Hanks is on that baseball team. I forget what it's called. And the woman says to him, Gina, what's her name? Gina Davis says, we're leaving. We quit coaching the team. And Tom Hanks says, why are you leaving? And she goes, it's too hard. And Tom Hanks looks at her and he said, no, the hard is what makes it great. Man, you will look back on accomplishments where you went through trial and tribulation, and we know this. Nobel Prize winning guy, Daniel Kahneman, says you'll build what's called memory happiness. People who have been through trenches and survived. Paris Hilton is not happy. Was my best guess. You think who do you think's happier, Sam Walton or Kim Kardashian? Yet everybody, Tai, what's the plan that will make me $1 million in 18 months? I'm like, be careful of asking for something because you just might get it and you might regret it. Better, as the Amish say, a fence that goes up fast falls down fast. Build the fence slow, step by step. Your brain uses contrast bias. If you go to bed tomorrow, $1 your savings account is going up versus today, and you memorized one little part of one book versus what you have today, and then you do it again, you'll be following what Bruce Lee said. I do not fear the man with 1,000 kicks. I fear the man that does one kick for 1,000 days. I do not fear the 7-year-old girl who knows black belt. That was a karate black belt. I fear the man with 15 years of jiu-jitsu wrestling. Okay? Each of you be that person. So, what we're going to do now. So, by the way, let me speak to the camera here. For the 67 steps, the next step, make sure you're going through all the other stuff that's in there. The twice a month calls. If you can't show up twice a month for something, if that's hard for you, oftentimes I meet people and I go, oh, this is hard for you? When Elon Musk built 3 companies, billion-dollar companies, someone asked him, was it hard? I was at a little talk he did. He said, you know, I'd rather put shards of glass in my eye than have to do it again. That's how painful it is. It was hard. But if you ask them, would you not do it? They were like, heck no. It's the best story ever. Make sure you can tell your grandkids the world's greatest stories. Make sure you could tell your friends the world's greatest stories. Hey man, I went $7 billion in debt. 2 years later, I'm on top. Make sure you could tell them, you know, I made $1 million. True story. Be able to tell this story. Man, I made $80 million doing a movie. And I gave it all away. I just gave it to the people in the movie. Why? Why not? I didn't want to be too materialistic. And I ended up with a net worth of $300 million. My name's Keanu Reeves. I made The Matrix. I was the main star. I made $80 million and I gave it all away. Why not? Why not help other people? Why not give a crazy amount? What's a crazier amount than all of the money that you made? And he's still on top. Who has MPFC and Amygdala mastery? Keanu Reeves? Or people here who are struggling, they're like, I ain't giving $100 to charity. I only got 1,000. No, there's a reason. To get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. This afternoon, we're going to go into very specific stuff on how to get and deserve more. Okay? But it starts right here. We went over fundamental stuff, creativity, toughness, not wanting it too easy, partnering up with people, not trying to change yourself more than you need to, but becoming part of a group. All right? So the time is, little housekeeping thing, we're going to try something, see who's stoic here. It's 1:20. So everybody come back. I'm going to start at 2:20. Now that means some people are going to be traumatized and good. Because remember what MPFC mastery, do some stuff that traumatizes you. Take a cold shower. Go without lunch today. Do something new. Break the patterns. See you in 1 hour.